What's going on, guys? Hirsch coming back at you. I had a little bit of a software crash there to where I could not continue on giving you guys my little airplay of what I was doing here on Procreate. So I just backed up a little bit, and I'm going to go back over a couple of things so you can check it out and see the progress. Basically, this is the base image that I started with. Back when I first started off showing everything that was going on here with the specifics of my kind of my little process here of going through design. Let me bump that music down just a little bit. Okay, so basically looking at this piece here, I started off actually with a dynamic symmetry grid, and then placed my image over and had some key intersecting areas on some of the darker areas, and I placed the ascending light, kind of like the light on the Baroque line. Let me illustrate that. So going from left up to right, which is normally in the Western world, in the European world, we read from left to right. So it's more pleasing and easier for our our trained system of vision to look left to right. And that's why this particular line here is called the Baroque line there. That is the Baroque diagonal. And that kind of gives you a sense of beauty and presence. The other one is this one here. This is called the sinister diagonal. And you can actually use these grids in the different roots and ratios that they're made up in, and place them over classical pieces of artwork, whether they're Renaissance era, Baroque, statues, and you can see how this dynamic symmetry is actually used throughout most of the composition of these great masterpieces. So going back into this, not saying that I'm going to create a masterpiece here. What I first started off with is I started off with this woman here who is, in this very strong dramatic lighting, this single light source kind of photography, which I've become really attracted to here lately, and then added this piece down here at the bottom. Having that piece added there kind of give me an idea to kind of reiterate a theme that I've used before in a past piece, to use the silhouette with this dramatic lighting, this particular image, and to use some photo manipulation to morph this silhouette of this nude female into look like it's being made up by the smoke itself. So this should be pretty fun. Before I go through and edit this too hard, I'm actually going to duplicate this, turn one of them off, and then go back to my eraser. We'll knock down my screen size, or excuse me, my brush size for my eraser a little bit, and we'll go through and we'll clean up a couple more of these edges. Now I'm going to go down to towards the bottom of the legs and blend in a little bit of the legs through the smoke so we can see the smoke that's behind it through those legs. So I'm going to go in here now and kind of soften up some of these areas so that we can see a little bit of this smoke kind of peeking through. Be a little bit more aggressive to get rid of some of these lines. And that's coming along pretty easily. And that's mostly, when you get to starting to, work with the whole photo manipulation thing with Procreate, this is a lot of what I'm using it for. It's not necessarily what I think everybody else is using it for. I've got a lot of buddies who use Procreate specifically just to do illustrations. Some of them don't even use Procreate because it has too many features, they say, and they'll use something like Sketchbook Pro. For me, I found a certain comfort level in using this little piece of software. It's actually really easy. There's tons and tons of tutorials that you can actually look at and see how people are actually doing these amazing illustrations or this really great photo manipulation or whatever it might be. Looking at this piece now, I think that there's a lot of black in here, which is great because that's really what's going to hold everything together. I'm not super in love with the nude female right now. I think that I think it's a little stiff, like it doesn't have enough movement. I actually really, really like these two pieces kind of together, the smoking girl and the silhouette. It's got a very similar light source, so they work really well together. I think the silhouette of the girl, there's something going on there that I'm just like not super keen on. Um, looking at exactly what I'm trying to do here, I think I'm going to end up having to lose the girl, the silhouette of the girl, the naked female, and maybe do some kind of skull morph in like this kind of area over here. Kind of do something with this and put a cool skull in there or something. So let's go do that. Let's go to my gallery. Oh, no, maybe not the gallery. Let's insert a flat image. Look at my photo stream here and see exactly what we want to get into. I'm thinking, like a cool skull or some other kind of imagery to kind of feed itself back in there. But we've got to have a similar light source. Like that's the biggest thing is, you want a similar light source or opposing light sources to help these kind of pieces stand out together. I've got tons of acanthus, I like doing a lot of stuff like that. Let's see. Gnarly thumb injury right there. Let's see. What would be a good skull that has a strong overhead light source? Strongly silhouetted. I've got tons and tons of reference. And I think it just depends on us finding what's going to work best for the image. A lot of it's going to be morphed out, I think, so basically blended into the existing imagery. That's not too bad. But I've used that skull, that particular skull, quite a bit. Just that skull itself, not in the same orientation, but a lot of that same skull. And that is something that I try to focus on quite a bit is not using the same reference over and over and over and over again. I mean, that can get really, really tiresome, and it's not only tiresome, but it's a little unfair to your clientele. They're coming to you for custom tattoos, hopefully. If you're lucky enough to do some of these custom tattoos, you should try and push yourself, to get some unique imagery to use. This one seems pretty good. I think we got to flip it that way so that we've got the same downward look. I think first things first, let me take and desaturate this and maybe darken it just a little bit. I mean, it's the most interesting thing to me about using these silhouettes to build these images is the fact that you do have to be daring and use so much black. There's a lot of black involved, but that's a good thing in the long run. And if done properly, they're tattoos that can, hold up for ages and ages and ages. So I think I'm going to do something like that. So I've got to do some resizing. And I think that's always important to keep in mind is that, here, as you add, change, and go in different directions with your subject matter or just your composition in general, one of the biggest strengths from using digital, illustration, or composition is the fact that you can go through, resize things, change things up with so much ease, in comparison to doing and using traditional forms of illustration. Going through a lot of this, I had my own, I guess, moral hangups about, I'm an artist. I paint. I do all of these things. I come from a traditional art background, and then I picked up an iPad and I started using it a little bit, and I figured out, wow, this is way easier than the little dips that I had taken before, where I had tried out a Wacom, not the Cintiq, but the another one where the Intuos, where you don't actually see the screen, and then I tried out the Note, the Samsung Notes, and I just really wasn't as impressed, or I really didn't feel like it was tactile enough. And then I started, messing around with the iPad, and a lot of things changed. One of the biggest things that I did when I started using the iPad Pro, and one of the first things that was recommended to me by other artists who use it, is to put a screen protector on it that is a matte screen protector. So it's got a little bit of tooth, kind of like a paper almost, so that the pen doesn't slide across the screen. That's one of the hardest things, I think, to get used to, is the way the pen will slide across the screen if you don't have that screen protector. So before I go off on too far of a tangent on exactly what's going on with why and how and what I use with my iPad, let's get back to this image, and we'll start a whole new subject matter and go into exactly what we can use to make it easier to use digital illustration now. So I'm going to actually back out all of these images and put my symmetry grid back up. And I'm going to take this, drop this down a little bit on the opacity. And then we're going to take this and drop the opacity on this guy too. And so now I'm going to take my main image, which is the female in the background, and try to get her into a position to where I like where she's going to be sitting inside of this root. I think right about there. And that's the beauty of it. We can always go back and adjust that as much as we want to. Now let's get this guy. I'd like for there, let's go back. I'd like for there to be a slight overlap in the eyes. There's enough darkness on the right side of the mandible of the skull for her lips to show through, and a little bit more blending to go through there. And let's put our smoking gal back down here. And let's take this guy out so I can see a little bit more about what's going on. Okay, so first things first, I think I'm going to duplicate this guy and then work on bringing out her in the background with my eraser and start doing some blending in this area. Oh. So if we come up through here, let's bump up the opacity on this guy a little bit. See, I mean, really quickly you can get some really interesting, very cool images going, and that's one of the great things about this, is being able to play with the imagery. And once you get a good idea about how you want to actually set up your compositions, this stuff goes by really, really quickly. If we start taking out the stuff around the cigar, we can start having this come together actually fairly quickly as well. I actually, looking at this image, I'm starting to actually quite like it. Just take that, bump that up a little bit. So this might actually turn into something pretty good. A lot of the times, I'll go through and I'll start working on something, and I really won't dig on exactly how it's all going down. I really like the strong presence of black in a lot of these. Unfortunately, with the way that Zoom is capturing, I think, a lot of this, you're not getting as big of a contrast as I am. So what I can do, because basically I'd like to show you, let me duplicate this. I'd like to show you a little bit more about what this looks like true to life. So we're just going to adjust and bump the brightness just a little bit. And maybe you can see that change. But yeah, I'm digging on it so far. I think that it's going to work out fairly well. Looking at the shape of it, it may be slightly top heavy, but I think that's going to be okay. There's a part of me that wants to incorporate a little acanthus in this, And I honestly, I don't think that there'd be a lot of harm in it. Let's go look at some acanthus real quick. And I mean, I don't think we really need anything super extravagant. However, it would be nice to have something to add a little bit more flow and a little bit more movement. I still don't think I've used this one in particular yet. Let's put this all the way at the top. And let's do some cleanup. And before we desaturate it, so this is a little bit time consuming. You know, it's a little bit of a bummer to have to go through and do all of this. But personally, I think it's well worth it to go around and do all of this. You know, for the sake of you guys, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm actually just going to duplicate this guy and see if the automatic stuff will actually work fairly well for us. And for images like this, to where there is quite a bit of contrast, you can actually get away fairly good with this. You know, especially if you're running the larger iPad Pro, because you're going to get a little bit more processing power, which is always going to be a good thing for these little projects like this, because it's going to free up a little bit more of its ability to actually work through what we're trying to get through. Actually, that worked out pretty well. So, you know, if you know, you think you can get away with it, you know, try this. It's such a huge space saver, and that's basically the little magnetic lasso tool for, or not magnetic lasso tool, but the magic wand version, if you're familiar with Photoshop, of what I just did there to kind of clear out some of the backspace of this acanthus carving. You know, you could sit here and draw something in really precise. You know, that's really not what this particular tutorial, or, you know, even explanation, this is. I don't even feel like I'm really giving you a tutorial. What I'm doing here is I'm just kind of showing you my process for you know, using Procreate. There's no specific rhyme or reason as to what I'm doing, other than this is just trial and error of what I felt I think works. You know, and that's the thing about using a lot of this acanthus that's already pre-made and not actually drawing it in, is a lot of it's just not going to fit perfectly. I'm going to actually take this and duplicate it one more time. Some of these projects that I start on Procreate, I'll end up with tons and tons and tons of layers, but that's actually not that big of a deal, considering, you know, how, you know, quote unquote low powered this app is. You can actually stack up quite a number of layers, and I'm actually doing this at full screen resolution. So, you know, a lot of these pictures that I make up, I can actually print out at fairly high quality. I've got a large format printer here, so I can actually, you know, print these out on large A4 size paper. So that's 13 by 19 inch paper, and have, you know, great resolution on these. So that's not even really a concern. So you can actually do some fairly high end work on this and have several layers stacked up, and group these layers and have them all set up just like you would in Photoshop if you were getting into some more hardcore illustration, you know, digitally. So let's see, what exactly am I going to put in here? First thing first, let's desaturate this. So, no, not color balance, saturation. Let's desaturate that. trying to turn down the brightness a little bit. Let's turn down our opaque so we can see a little bit more about what's going on. Blow this up just a little bit. So this is one of the most fun parts, but also one of the most frustrating parts about doing a lot of this digital composition is just really trying to figure out these visual puzzles where this stuff should go. Now I'm spending some time, looking at this acanthus. I'm trying to figure out even if this is the right acanthus to put in this piece. I may want something that's a little bit more open. So what I'm going to do, even though I've saved up all these layers, is we're going to go back out and we're going to see if we can't find another one that might work a little bit better for the particular image that we're going with. And I think, had I sat there and rendered out that filigree and that acanthus, that rococo, accent, I think I would have been a little bit more invested in it, maybe, or a little bit more pot committed because I've spent so much time kind of putting that together. So I think having the ability to kind of back off and go, okay, well, that's not working, and not feel so attached to that particular rendering, it helps out so much in your flexibility of going, okay, let me find out what's going to work best. I'm not saying that we try to cut corners or that we're being lazy or anything like that. It's just if you spend enough time drawing something, you become emotionally connected or attached to it. So you fall into this thing of, maybe not criticizing as hard as you should, but being able to put things together really quickly with not as much effort, and using more of your artistic ability to compose your artwork, I think helps you come out with better choices. And then you can do some maybe hardcore rendering at the end, depending on what your end product is. For me, a lot of it is the end result and end product for a lot of these drawings, especially the stuff done on Procreate, is going to end up as a tattoo. So I'm sitting here really pushing myself to come up with a good enough reference, because my end rendering is in a different medium. However, if you're going to be a full-on digital artist, you can really sit here and go through this process and render everything out. And then you can even take your files and export them into a PSD, and then take it onto a fully capable computer, go through, break out your Cintiq, and really render these things out heavily. For me, this has replaced me taking any paper on the road, really. I do all my outlines. I have a digital printer that will print out all of my outlines exactly the way I need them. So for me, this is almost more like a sketchbook that I can take around with me, and a really quick and dirty way to use Photoshop without using actual Photoshop. Let's see. I don't know if I have the exact kind of acanthus that I want to use. This isn't bad. Let's flip it around the other way. Let's make it big, and let's take out this background. I mean, it's kind of silly how easy this is in comparison to having to draw out this stuff on a regular basis, and the reason I have so much appreciation for it is this is actually how I ended up. This is how I started. Is not through a digital sense, but stacks of tracing paper on top of each other and really building up these images, and then coming to a completed state to where I just make an outline. I never did any full renditions, and especially if you're going to be doing a lot of realism in your artwork, you really need reference. Your artwork will only build on top of that reference. So the better your reference, the easier it is, I think, to complete a really interesting kind of forward-thinking project and something that's different. That's the whole point of, at least for me, for making artwork, is that I want to set myself apart. I may find certain things or, recent trends or, tastes that I find attractive and I want to incorporate, but I never want to really just go through and steal something specifically from anybody. So let's see. Let's take our hue and saturation out. Let's darken this a little bit. Let's then duplicate this and knock down our opacity one more time. And let's see if we can't find a good place for this guy to live. And that's what I want to concentrate on, is I really don't need this whole thing. So if I can find a really interesting way. There's something there. And I think we're going to deal with something like that. It's always important to me that once I get something in position, that I also make another copy and duplicate that. So now I can go through and I can actually edit this entire piece. Let's say I over edit it and I screw it up. I can just go back and click that duplicated layer back up, get rid of this one, then duplicate it again so that I can go back through, and if I ruin it, I still come back to that base layer. Let's say I come up with something cool on the other hand, I can just keep that, but I've always got that safety blanket of those other layers, those unedited layers, so that I can go back and change things. And this is really handy when I'm dealing with a client, especially if we're building and designing a tattoo that has an ongoing story and that things always kind of change, or we come up with another idea. We want to be able to take these things out and visualize this composition. That's the one thing about being a tattoo artist that really never changes. Even if I'm dealing with somebody who gives me free reign to do whatever I want, I'm still building a tattoo around a human being at the very least. And then if I have their input, it's like having a collaborative project. So now I've got somebody who is, to a certain extent, an art director giving me ideas or proposals for the composition. And this way I can kind of experiment with these things really quickly and give them a visual aid on how things can change, but yet keep the overall same theme, or entire themes can change, but we can keep very similar imagery. And what's really nice about this is I can do several different comps, and usually it ends up being a Frankenstein event, to where they're like, I like this out of this one, I like this aspect out of this one, the background's really cool on this, and then they have me put them all together. Most of the time now, I'm very lucky in the fact that usually I'll come up with a composition and I'll like it, and it'll be that much of my taste that people will accept it as one of my tattoos, so that I can just tattoo it on them and they can just collect that. I think that takes a little bit more time to build up before you get to that level where people are expecting a specific style from you. And I'm still trying to find my voice, and I think that's something that's very constant amongst the tattooers who are really trying to put themselves in a position to expand on their artwork and not just continuously do the same thing over and over and over again. So now that I've kind of found a good spot that I like this in, I'm going to do a little bit of editing here. Let's knock back this here for sure, because I don't want that up there. I really don't think I want this here either. Let's see, let's put this on. Okay, let's bump up. So this is a good example of why it's good to keep this, you know, just in case I can like do a quick comparison. I'm digging on this drawing actually quite a bit now that we're getting a little bit deeper into it. Let's see. I think it's going to be better if we have the finger sticking out though, because looking at it, actually, why don't we do this? Knock this down to 50, and then we'll duplicate this. That'll make it that much darker. And then let's bump this opacity up. And then we'll knock back all of this to where there's a little bit more of a blend. We'll come back here and we'll actually take these out just a little bit. Yeah, so I think if anything, that's a great place to stop. You know, we can kind of look and appreciate this a little bit more. I think that there are certain aspects of this particular drawing which I think need to become a little bit more refined. Let me go back through here and we'll knock a little bit of that out before we leave. You know, other than that, I think this is a great place to stop. I appreciate you guys stopping in and listening up. You know, like I said, this is just me trying this whole thing out to see how far I can get with it. What we're going to do is get together with Sam, try to work out the logistics of him being in Australia and me being over here in Texas, and trying to link up so that we can do this actually together. But in the meantime, I appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much.